Welcome back to Safa's Unscripted, episode 103. Brett Burns, Brevan Herbst. We just actually watched. This is pretty odd. We just watched the Sevens Rugby quarterfinal, the Blitzbox going to the semi-final, and we kind of decided on this video before this match happened. Okay, but anyway, we'll speak about that in a second. Brett, how are we doing?
Just to reiterate on what you just said, I literally just witnessed the best defense I've ever seen in my entire life in Sevens Rugby. Ever. Since I was born.
Yeah, that was insane. Well, first of all, I'm sure we're all good after that. I mean, definite chance at a medal for the Blitzbox. I mean, that's great news. But that defense was insane. I mean, it literally reminded me of the Springboks there in 2019 and in 2023. Like, that was insane.
Yeah. Anyway, to get onto the topic or the discussion for today's episode, it's kind of like when you look at South African rugby as a whole, you look at the Springboks, you look at our franchises, you look at our women's game, you look at our under 20s and even our sevens. In what state are we currently in? Like, is it a dangerous state, or is it a progressive state, or is it actually on a bit of a decline and something that we haven't picked up on recently necessarily? Like, if you look at the Stormers, not the Stormers, the Springboks, obviously we are world champions and stuff, but we've kind of seen like the teams on a bit of an older side. But then you look at our under 20s, probably our worst season in a very long time. I know we just beat the All Blacks, but this Blitzbox team has fallen off a cliff. Yeah. And slowly but surely our women's game is getting better, but it's not at the standard it should be. So just before we get into much detail, Brevan, I'll come to you first. What do you think of the current state of South African rugby as a whole?
To be honest, I just think it's an overreaction that people think that we're in a bit of a crisis. I mean, personally, if I look at the under 20s, yeah, sure, the players can take some accountability, but I fully believe the coaching staff is to blame there at the under 20s. I do not think they're within their depth to be there. I think the players we have in the under 20s are good enough to compete with the best. Obviously, just like I said, they should take some accountability, but I think there is a massive blame there towards coaching staff. Women's game, it's never really been big here, It's never really grown, especially from school level. If you look at school level, only now are we starting to see some schools kind of bring that up, and that will come in its own due time. And as for the sevens, that I can see we've kind of hit a bit of a drop, but I mean, we just saw the Oaks can do it, It's not like they can't. It's just a matter of being consistent and kind of just fixing it, yeah.
Yeah, Brett?
I agree. That's a complete overreaction for me as well, because if I've noticed now with content creators across the whole world that if you want your views to go up or your clicks or whatever, you take a dig at South Africa. Like, it's literally they know that the South African fans are the most passionate, so there's going to be comments, there's going to be clicks, there's going to be views, there's going to be all that stuff. So that was the point. Like, for example, that oak from New Zealand, Ben Smith, the Twitter oak or X, he has zero knowledge of rugby at all. All he has to do is take a dig at Rassie or at the Springboks, and boom, he's got all these views and clicks and everything. He's fishing, and it works against South African rugby. So I don't think there's cause for disaster or panic at all in South African rugby. Look at our seven side. We were off the cliff, had to qualify for the Olympics like 3 weeks
final
ago.
Spot.
Yeah, literally the last spot, and now we're into a cup semi-final. So South African rugby will always do this. Always. So many always. We're used to it by now. So I don't think it's anything to even talk about, if I'm completely honest.
Well, I do think there is a discussion. Because if we look at a couple of years ago, that's why it is a discussion, Brett. Because even though we can all admit, listen, it's not on a downward spiral, and South African rugby will never go into the ditches, and it's not something necessarily to worry about. But it isn't all sunshine and rainbows. Like if you look at, let's say, 10 years ago, how good our under 20s rugby was. It was absolutely insane. Brevin, I think someone's knocking at your door.
No, it's not, by the way. I also
Anyway,
was checking.
so you look at how good we were then, right? How many tournaments have we won? You look at the team; all of them came through, and they became Springboks. You look at our under 20s now, and you're like, well, how many of them have literal futures as Springboks? Are we as physically dominant in the under 20 stage as we are like we used to be? And it's not like that. But on the other side, again, I'm thinking like, yeah, well, our under 20s weren't that good. We had a couple of standout players, but literally you literally look 1 year above it, and you find Ethan Hooker, you find Sasha Feinberg, you find so much talent in there. It's actually ridiculous. So we're narrowing it down to the under 20s, but just 1 year above it is absolutely insane talent from us.
Yeah, I just on the under 20s there. When I saw the squad selection for the under 20s, I was appalled. I actually been following them since under 18, and I thought that the wrong people are in this like championship competition or whatever they're calling it. I felt like some of the better players got left out, and some of the more physical, bigger boys got left out. So I feel like it was a coaching mishap. I don't think it was necessarily the under 20s being poor. I just think the wrong players got selected. And I see Don Himon and Dwayne Vermeulen have been sent to the under 20s now to go fix their problems.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
And that's big.
yeah.
When you get coaches that have been there, they've done it. Dwayne Vermeulen obviously wants to prove himself as a coach as well, so he knows he needs to get improvement done. I think it's kind of like the perfect situation for him.
I agree.
So it's not all doom and gloom there. I truly believe it will get better. But as I said, if you just look literally 1 year above it, you see the world of talent that we have. Even a couple of years above it, like the youngsters we've still got coming through, knocking on the door, it's massive, right? So it does look good. I want to switch the conversation, Brett. I'm not sure if Brevan's going to join again, by the way. I want to switch the conversation a bit. The one thing that I think is on a very good upward trajectory, whatever, right, is our franchise rugby. And I am very excited to see where our franchise rugby goes. I don't know what your thoughts are on it, but the fact that we are actually getting sponsors, getting enough money to keep our players, bring some players back. I've been very vocal about it that I don't care about bringing players back because they're usually on the older side. Yeah, it's nice. But the main thing for me is to keep our talent in South Africa, keep them local, give them enough incentive to actually want to stay here. That is massive. And it looks like we're doing that with the big deals to Sasha, big deals to Damian Willemse and those guys. That is massive for us. What's your thoughts on that?
Firstly, before I give my thoughts, the message that Brevan just sent now said that those things we heard were gunshots. And he said there's an emergency in his complex. So now that's a juicy story.
Did he say it was gunshots?
He said emergency and then a pui pui. Pew pew. Oh. Anyway, yeah, but anyway, so I do like the fact that local companies and companies abroad are staying within the realms of South African rugby. Yeah, so I'm actually very looking forward to, now that you mentioned the year above the current under 20s, the Ethan Hookers and those guys. I feel sorry for the rest of the world because our depth in this country is insane. Like it is, we have really, really good players. And actually, if you think about I've been watching the Currie Cup now, these smaller unions, there are players that are knocking. Bigger unions are going to snap them up. So I think, wow, I'm very positive for South Africa. So I
You,
don't
you
think
know what?
in
You know what's a great thing about it is like they're knocking on the door even more now because they want to become professional rugby players. Like
Mm.
usually in the past, it was like when we were in the Super Rugby, you kind of saw like our professional rugby players getting less and less and less because there's no incentive really in playing in South Africa unless you get the big deal outside. But now that like overseas sponsorships have come in, we're playing in the URC. There's
Mm.
more eyes on it. All of a sudden,
Mm.
you see boys that actually want to play rugby, like the guys that follow their dreams in terms of playing rugby. And I think we're in a great point where I know I've brought it up before, where it's like spot the under 30 in the Springbok team. But now it's like, well, they kind of at the end of their career, and you look at who's coming through, and they'll get coaching from those guys. They'll be ingrained into that system. With one guy going out, he'll probably hit peak. Like the end of Damien Dialenda, we'll see the peak of Ethan Hooker again. Just
Mm.
like the end of Andre Pollard, we'll see the peak of Sasha Feinberg again.
Yeah.
The same with Damian Willemse, and that is very very exciting to see. So it's massive for our franchises when we get hungry boys again that really want to stay in here, make an impact locally. Because when it comes to it, like why would you sit in rainy conditions in England when you can get the same pay but live out here in beautiful Cape Town, play in the URC, and obviously represent your country, because it's easier to get into playing for your country when you actually play in South Africa. Like there's more eyes on you then.
Isn't it raining in Cape Town now?
Yes, but it's not raining 9 months of the year.
Yeah, true. No, I'm just joking because I actually saw the weather app now
It,
before
it rains like 3 weeks a year
in winter.
overall.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
don't
So
get better than Cape Town. I'm dead serious.
I agree. I agree. That's why I've built there. So I
Yeah,
agree. Also, what I also wanted to say now is the fact that South Africa left Super Rugby has saved South African sports, or saved South African rugby as a whole. Because I do, like, when I was a kid, it was always fun to watch the early games on a Saturday, like 9 a.m., sometimes 6:30 a.m., and then a 12 o'clock game if we're in Australia. But then now all the games are perfect bright time in South Africa. So
yeah,
so I think people are getting more exposed to the game now, because like majority of people on a Friday can't watch rugby at 9 a.m. because they're at work.
yeah.
So I think now there's more exposure and people are getting noticed and people are talking more, and social media has helped South Africa tremendously, and like guys like us just talking about the game already. So I think South African rugby is, I'm very positive.
Yeah, I fully agree. The one worrying thing, it sounds so silly now saying it's worrying because we're playing in the semifinals, and I kind of want to touch on the sevens game because we can't act like it's all good. Like this is one tournament that we did well in now, but we still lost the first two pool games, right, against New Zealand, which is kind of expected. Ireland is kind of expected now, but they've only come really through the ranks in the last, what's it, 2 years. I think 3 years ago they made their first mark in the sevens circuit, and look at how good they've become in those 3 years, right? What can we do to better our sevens to get back to where it used to be? Because we were world beaters at a time.
Yeah, I think that the sevens definitely need to incentivize their players much more, because people that I know personally that are probably run a 10.3 on the 100 meter, they are getting snapped. They are getting paid more for amateur club rugby than the
Yeah,
Blitzboks are getting paid. So
yeah,
they'll rather go play first team at a club than go travel the world with a Blitzboks, which is a
yeah,
massive problem for me. I do know some clubs are very, very wealthy and they can afford it. So don't take words out of my mouth here that all clubs do that, because most clubs don't. But I mean, we are losing players to amateurs. So I think that definitely there needs to be a cash injection there of note, and that rugby academy, that what the one, what's his name, Skuman, Marius Skuman, that he runs the high performance thing. I think that also needs to get more traction, more funding, stuff like that. So
Yeah,
um, yeah, and players mustn't want to go to 15-man rugby like a Sinatla. He obviously thought that he could potentially play for the Springboks, but he was the only one that thought that. I think
yeah,
that if he stayed at sevens, he'd go down as one of the best in the world ever.
yeah.
Um, now that
He was
legacy's
literally goat status already in Seventh Circuit.
yeah.
Um, I want to bring up an interesting thing because I said it to you before we started the pod. Um, if we had to pull a France or Ireland and actually pull in some 15-man players, right?
Mm,
I feel like we could actually be unstoppable. Like I
I
know
agree.
other teams can do it as well, but so many of our great players come from sevens. So it's like
Yeah.
if we had our forwards as Quagga Smith, JC Pretorius, and Werner Koch, and in our backline we just threw Cheslin Colby, Kurtley Aronson, Damien Willems, and then took two of our hot feet steppers, or hot steppers that's already in that sevens team. How do you beat that? Like you getting mauled at every breakdown, you'll have hands in the ruck. Literally every single one, you have to secure that ball with your life. You'll have no
Yeah.
players to attack with. If there's that ball just pops out and we pick it up, I mean, who are you tackling? Nobody.
I agree, and all those players that you've mentioned there are also, they're not just good defenders, they are great defenders.
Yeah,
Like Colby for me is one of the best defensive wings in the world. People don't often notice that because he's always stepping and running and scoring tries,
yeah,
but he makes good hits and hard hits. So that coming back to sevens, because he was at sevens, but I think he was about 10 kgs lighter when he played for the seven side.
yeah, of course.
Yeah, but think of a guy like Angelo Davids at Western Province, the Stormers. He could also come back. He's also a sevens player,
Yeah.
because he's
A
bulked
lot
up a
of our
lot.
flyers are.
Yeah. So
That's
yeah,
that's that's the thing, right? Like people talk about Hugo Keenan and Antoine Dupont. It's like, well, if the Cephas just pulled the same thing, like
mm,
I mean, seriously, come off it. I know they are great players. They are
yeah,
amazing players. But the Seventh Circuit should stay with the Sevens players. There's no point in bringing back or bringing in 15-man players because then you actually just take away from the guys that worked so hard to actually get you there.
I, I agree.
Um, let's go to the final talking point. We'll just fly through it because obviously we don't watch it as much. What do you think of the current state of the women's game? Do you think it's on the up? I think it's slowly but surely building, but it needs a lot of it still needs a lot of
It,
wood to
it,
set this thing on fire.
Yeah, it's definitely on the up. And if I think South African rugby of the all the top tier men team, I think South Africa's women's rugby is the youngest
Mm,
of the top ones. I'm not. Don't quote me again on that. Don't have That's not a known fact, but I think like New Zealand started in the early 90s. England started in the early 90s. They have so much development there and they are well funded. I think South African women, the first Springbok game was 2004. I mean,
yeah,
I was already in high school. So, yeah, I think that we are a bit behind, but I do see the higher ups are making a valid effort to get the women's
yeah,
games. My cousin, she was a hockey player, and now this year she's playing women's rugby. So
yeah.
it's pretty cool that more people are getting involved.
Yeah, and you kind of see the 15 women or the women's 15 and the sevens game kind of growing together, which is
Mm.
great. So that's something like for the future. Would you say any? I mean, how do I even pose this question? Like, what category of what we've mentioned in terms of Springboks franchise sevens women's are you looking most forward to, and would you say any of them are in danger, or which one is most likely to tip a lot more?
Oh, interesting question. I After the second test of the Irish game, I've like I said in our previous episode, I feel that with Rassi's favoritism, I think it's going to be stagnant, and there needs to be change. Otherwise, I feel like those great players could fall off the bus because you can't. Yeah, I'm probably going to say the under 20s, the age group rugby. I'm not going to talk about the Springboks. I'm going to talk about the age group rugby. I think that they probably with South African kids sport, Craven Week this year was actually terrible. So I'm nervous for the youngsters.
Yeah, but as always, like if you go lower, you can only go higher from there. Like, I mean, I do believe that Dwayne and Don Iman and those guys, when they come in, you'll see a big difference. You'll see more structure. Like there was like zero structure for our youngsters. And I just think the fact that you get the opportunity to go and be selected from them, go and play for them, I think that is motivation and inspiration enough for more boys to say, listen, I'm going to stick up my hand to go and do that. So I do agree with you that that's probably in the most danger, but I'm also most excited to see where it can go from here. Well, actually, no, I'm most excited to see where it can go from here. The thing that I think is most in danger is probably the sevens because we're not sure around the funding of it. It's so up and down. We only perform in Dubai and maybe at the Cape Town Sevens, but we never win in Cape Town. But yeah, overall, I think we're in a good state. Like I saw a couple of tweets and people were really overreacting, in my opinion, on it. But I thought it was an interesting discussion because not all worries are invalid necessarily if you can say it like that.
Also, just to come back to what I said now previously about the Craven Week, I know people are going to come at me because the Western Province side and the Free State side, they were very good, but I was excluding them in my statement.
Yeah,
I felt
because we
like
talk about it as a whole.
yeah, the majority. Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's me.
I just want to ask you a final question. How do you think, let's say in 5 years from now, how does our franchise rugby look?
Depending
I'm
on
going
what
with dangerous. I'm going with
depending on
very
what
dangerous.
tournaments we're playing, because I think that there's a Champions Trophy very close to our future, in our
Yeah.
future,
I,
very
I,
close.
I think the fact that the Bulls and the Stormers have both gone on to play in finals, one of us has gone to win it. We've had the taste of playoff. What's it? Champions Cup rugby. I get a feeling we might really go on and push. The funding just has to be there for our youngsters to come through. If we can get some proper squad depth, bigger squads to actually go ahead, bigger and quality squads, just kind of the same as Leinster, where you can compete on all tournaments that you play in.
Yeah,
I think we could be in a very, very good position in the near future. Anyway,
completely.
that brings us to the end. Thank you everyone for watching. Please do remember to like and subscribe. As always, we appreciate you guys. Brevan did let us know everything is okay. Anyway,
Yes.
thank you very much. Goodbye.
Okay, bye.